According to Dr. Catherine Phillips, body dysmorphic disorder affects 1.7% to 2.9% of the general population. That's about 1 in 50 people. This month, across the globe, people work to bring awareness about eating disorders. As we continue our quest to uncover the hardships presented to our youth by our culture, we look to the undeniable rise in mental health struggles such as eating disorders, anxiety and depression, and even suicide.
We're in an interesting place where on one hand, health and wellness is going up. And then on another hand, so is depression and anxiety and suicide thoughts or actual suicide, right? So it's like they're both in tandem going up. And so, well, there's something not right. If depression and anxiety and suicide rates are going up, and as is obesity, then we're clearly not teaching the right things in health.
That's Nikki Sharp, author of The 5-Day Real Food Detox, world-renowned model and health and fitness expert. Today on The Balanced Voice, we sit down with her to discuss her journey to health and wellness and why she thinks mental health struggles, such as body dysmorphic disorder, are on the rise. Ultimately, we answer this question: how do we raise up young people who believe their self-worth is more than just their appearance and the images portrayed on social media? Without further ado, here's your host, Rania Mankarios.
Well, welcome to The Balanced Voice. We are thrilled to have Nikki Sharp with us today. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you. Very, very excited to be here.
We're so happy. Nikki is a formal international model. She still looks like a model. Her own health journey led her to become passionate about helping others create a balanced and fulfilled life through food, exercise, and spirituality. She is now a well-known motivational speaker, creator of the 5-Day Detox and Sharper Living, a 2-time best-selling author and podcast host, iTunes Top 30 podcast, mind you. To learn more about Nikki, follow her on IG at Nikki Sharp and online at nikkisharp.com. Again, Nikki, it is such an honor to have you with us. Thank you again.
Of course. So super excited to dive in and see what unfolds.
So I have found you to be so interesting for so many reasons. One, go to your IG page. I mean, you are literally perfect by every definition known to man in every possible way. But you're very honest about your journey. You're very honest about the struggles that you have gone through to get where you are. The fact that fame in some places has been more of a trap than this, tremendous release, about addiction, about eating disorders. You've come full circle to talk about how you've found balance between sort of beauty, health, and wellness, and so many unique gems that you share through YouTube, through your IG page, through your website. So we're so excited to have you, especially right now when the world seems so divided, when every young girl is striving to be exactly like you in the hopes that just means ultimate joy, peace, happiness, and everything else. You provide such a balanced conversation about what everything means. So I want to just take it back a little bit. Obviously, growing up, you knew that you were beautiful, tall, thin, had all the makings of a model. Did that sort of push you into the industry? Were you discovered? How did that happen?
I was not discovered. Everything that I've ever done in my life, I've worked really hard at. I've never had anything handed to me on a silver platter. So growing up, I was very tall and skinny as a kid, like very, very skinny, and to the point where when I was in preschool and kindergarten, and I would like suck on rocks and all these like just weird things that kids do. The school would constantly go to my parents and ask, are you feeding her? And it's like, that was just my body. And so I've never fit in any sort of norm. So being so different at such a young age, I was looking at all these supermodels, Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss and Cindy Crawford. And I wanted to be like them. And I loved the glossy magazine. So I would put photos of them on my wall. And then around 15, I started coming a little bit more into my body. I was no longer this like super gangly, awkward, giraffe looking kid. And I went to a modeling agency. They didn't sign me for 1 year until I could start driving. And then I went to college, and my agent really wanted me to go overseas, international. And I said, I need to graduate university first. I just intuitively knew that modeling is not a career that you do forever. And so I don't want to say I wanted a plan B, but college was my plan A at the end of the day. Like, it was, because that's for me what was going to be of essence to whatever else I was going to do, which I didn't yet know. And yeah, I mean, with modeling, it was just, I wanted to, only now when I look back, do I understand why I wanted to be a model. And that was to be seen, recognized, acknowledged. There was obviously a level of significance as you get older, but at a young age, it's much more based on this fact that you don't feel seen in your life. And so you want to be seen by everybody. And it was also creative. And I love modeling because it is a very creative means to express yourself. So it wasn't only that, but yeah.
It's so interesting that you say that, because isn't that, every young girl today on social media that's striving so hard to be seen.
Yeah.
It's such a compelling notion or way of saying something that's actually so true. The modeling industry, at least a decade ago, was a more comprehensive way of doing that. There was some structure to it. And of course, you had your agent, you had parameters around who would book you, how they'd book you, what you would do, what you would wear, how you'd be treated. And now on social media, every young girl that is striving to be seen is sort of her own agent, executor, and publicist, and is pushing out images of herself. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on that in a minute, but I want to go back to this time in your life. You were 19 years old, you moved to LA, first time on your own, and you moved for school, I believe. You talk in your blogs and in your posting about the fact that that's when an eating disorder started for you, and the fact that food became a source of control.
Yeah, absolutely. I went from living a typical life, nothing really to complain of, to being by myself. My boyfriend lived back in Colorado. I spoke with my parents, but not a ton. And it just was, I was also in the modeling industry, and I just remember seeing a photo of myself one day and being like, wow, I think I look really bad. And that's kind of where this body dysmorphia really kicked in, because I'd never cared about that. Oh, my hips looked a little bigger. And like, I've always had a smaller waist, bigger hips. And I'd never cared about that. And then you get into the modeling industry where they're so on point about every centimeter on your body. And so from there to being in a school that was really not the school being challenging, but being in dorms that weren't really like dorms. I was all of a sudden living with seven other girls, and I'm an only child, and half of them didn't clean up after themselves. And it was too much for my precious little mind to handle while I was working, modeling, and going to school full time, and missing my family, didn't really make friends that year. So I don't really know how it happened. It just happened that I literally overnight kind of stopped eating and restricting. And I can't say it was like this one thing, but it was just the perfect storm, let's say.
You wrote, again, the skinnier you got, it seemed like the more jobs you got in the modeling industry. And you posted a photo of yourself at that time on your IG page at Nikki Sharp. But you also shared, in the morning, you'd have instant coffee with sugar-free creamer, 2 packets of Sweet and Low, 1 egg omelet, and a slice of orange with fake cheese and 2 pepperoni slices. And then lunch and dinner, you kind of walk through how little you ate. And, you just see this picture of this beautiful girl that's starving herself. And you mentioned the word control. And I think that's what it comes down to. Of course, eating disorders are an effort for people who are hurting to gain control over an area of their lives where they feel like they have no control. And then especially being in a modeling industry where I think at that time, it seems like you're rewarded for the thinner you are, the more attention you get. By 20, you're now moving to Shanghai.
Yeah.
How did that change things for you?
I had just graduated university, so I flew through college, graduating before I was even legal to drink. And then like a week later, I told my dad, by the way, I'm going to Shanghai to model. And he was not very thrilled with me for that. But I went, and I finally had to hold back on my food. I was no longer restricting. Everything was good. And then once again, I placed myself into just tipsy-turvy, upside down craziness, where, you live with the same girls you go on castings with, and you're halfway across the world. And we didn't have WhatsApp and all these things. It was like we had Skype that people communicated through. People still use payphones, all of that. So for example, Facebook, I don't know if it still is, was blocked in China when I lived there. So I couldn't even communicate. So it was once again, a lot. And I overnight was like, oh, I'm not skinny enough to be in this industry again. And I actually recently had that go through my mind, where I signed on to an agency here in Miami. And I remember getting in my bathing suit and them looking at me and taking the digitals. And I was like, ooh, I don't feel very good in myself. And I was like, Nikki, if that's where your mind's going to go, you will never, I will not let you go back into that.
This balance conversation is made possible by Brigitte and Bashar Kalai, Hallie Vanderheider, Sippy and AJ Karana, and Deepwater Productions. If you're interested in furthering our mission of facilitating balanced conversations, offering real solutions, contact us at thebalancevoicepodcast.com.
At that time, the anorexia turned into binge eating, and then you had addiction issues to sleeping pills. And you just think of the pressure that your life was under, and maybe how even unhappy you might have been at that time, or share that you were at that time. But yet every girl in the world would have snapped their fingers in 2 seconds to replace where you were and to be you. And so now you look, obviously that's many years ago, and you look at girls today. You mention and you talk a lot about sort of the purpose of a life journey and a soul's journey, and that you've found purpose in your experiences. But when you look at girls today, do you want to shake them and say, I wish you could think of this or know this or stop doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest questions that people come to me with is, how do I be an influencer?
Yeah.
You don't. Because it's not a glamorous job. Yes, you get things free, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot. And you have to be still thick skin, okay with people saying bad things to you on the internet. And the other side of that is I do believe the reason people want to be influencers is because it's this deep desire to be seen. It's the same as why people would move to Hollywood to try to become a celebrity. Well, if you're not passionate about acting and willing to take every small paying job with no promise of being famous, that's when you really care about it. And that's the same for me. I'm even if my name wasn't known, I would still be doing what I do. But when you have this desire to have 1 million followers, well, that's because there's a deeper need to be seen, heard, acknowledged. And that's where we actually have to do the work, pretty much not anywhere else. But most of America and humanity is not at that place, because Instagram is still such a new place where you can be famous, or TikTok, or, social media.
And I don't know if there's a way to stop people from craving the need to be seen.
No, I don't think it will ever go away. I do believe that when we're kind of we're in an interesting place where on one hand, health and wellness is going up. And then on another hand, so is depression and anxiety and suicide thoughts, or actual suicide, right? So it's they're both in tandem going up. And so, well, there's something not right. If depression and anxiety and suicide rates are going up, and as is obesity, then we're clearly not teaching the right things in health, which I do believe we're starting to understand more and more of that, but it's a slower curve than, let's say, social media was.
And I wonder if it's because the breakdown of it all is just too much for people to understand, how social media impacts our lives. Even for us as a nonprofit, we rely so much on social media to get our message out. And, if you have an event or do a whatever and you don't take a photo of it and share it, it's like it never existed, and yet that pressure is become a part of us. It's become a part of how we communicate, how we share who we are. You have an entire generation of young kids who want to be little brands, and that's ingrained in them. And I'm fascinated by the study I read not too long ago out of the UK, where it did talk about, obviously, the nexus between mental health and depression and suicidal ideation, but it also looked at how girls use, and you talk a lot about how you started your Instagram page, and I want you to share a little bit about that with us, but how girls now no longer dress, because they think so-and-so is cute in hopes that so-and-so will recognize them. They dress and do makeup and they pout into a camera specifically to post on social media. It's very isolated, but it's for the likes and the clicks and the attraction, the attention they get back. You talk about when you started your your first Instagram page, and sort of the journey that was for you. And I found that really interesting.
Yeah. So, when I started, it's very different. People start an Instagram account primarily either as a personal, where they're like, I'm never going to grow this, or as I want to grow this. I want 1 million followers. Back in the day, 2013, I thought I was still late to the game. And I started a page because on my Nikki Sharp one was just a purely personal. It was like travel, whatever. And I started posting photos of my food. And I had a friend saying, Nikki, nobody cares what you're eating. Why are you posting this? And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to start a different account because I wanted to track my health journey as I was going through the eating disorders and I was learning to get healthy. I was starting to cook for myself. So I started this other account and I would post headless body shots of myself. So I'd, take a photo in the mirror and cut my head off. And it would be me really talking about very openly body dysmorphia, my eating disorders. And I didn't want people seeing my face because, I was known here and there a little bit, but nothing like maybe one person would know me. But it was more so I felt like when nobody saw my face, I could share my real feelings. And so the more that I would share of talking about, the eating disorder and overcoming it and doing this and trying this and how I felt, and I had a good day, I had a bad day, no one else was doing that. And I would post photos that motivated me to be healthier. And so my account just kept growing. And people kind of latched on to that authenticity because truly no one else was doing that. And so from there, finally, I remember the first time I posted a photo of myself with my face and I was terrified. I think I took it down after like 3 hours. I was like tweaking in the background, like they'll know who I am. Anyway, so then by the time I think I hit like 5,000 followers or so, 10,000, I started sharing photos of myself because I wrote this detox program. And it really got to the point where I knew that I was onto something for myself when people were messaging me, and we didn't have like DMs back in the day, but they would email me because I would share my email and they would email me and tell me, their biggest secrets. And I did my blog, I did inspiring interviews where I would interview my followers and these incredible journeys that they've had. And so the more that I shared their experiences while talking about mine, I helped myself through this really challenging period, but I also started feeling connection to people, which I'd never really had before. And that's really how it grew. And then once I started sharing more of myself, then the account grew along with the ebook sales and all of that.
Nikki, you have an incredible platform. We're so excited to have had you on The Balanced Voice, and you're offering so much balance over there or wherever you are in the world. So we'll continue following you, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. And thank you again so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was wonderful. I appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Ranya's work by following her at The Renya Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.